What if the smartest money you'll ever spend in retirement has nothing to do with your next investment? Contrary to what you might see around you, I'd actually argue that it has nothing to do with the materialistic items that you might see online, in social media, or when speaking to friends at a cocktail party. In fact, it might actually feel invisible, because for the ultra wealthy, it's not necessarily how much they have, it's how they spend it with intention. And today, I'm going to break down for you the top 5 categories where I've seen the ultra wealthy spend money in retirement with zero regrets. And number 4 is the hidden luxury that I would say separates the wealthy from the truly free. Because once you understand it, you might never look at capital allocation the same way again. So let me paint a picture for you. Many times, we come across high net worth families that are entering in retirement, but they're still operating as if they're in the day-to-day of accumulation. They try to optimize every dollar. They debate with themselves if the second home is worth it or not. They might even skip the once-in-a-lifetime trip with family because they're too wrapped up in minutia. Then, 5 years pass. Next thing you know, 10 years pass. And they could find themselves looking back with quiet regret. Not because they didn't compound wealth properly, but because they never enjoyed the optionality that can come with doing so. They built all that freedom for what exactly? The stressed relationships, the strained time that they missed with family, day after day, month after month, year after year. But the ultra wealthy, who make decisions without regrets, they deploy capital differently. Not less or more, just different. They buy things that they feel can help them compound quality of life. They buy things that help take back their time, and they do it with intention. Category number 1, for instance, is something that I believe is the foundation for everything else to come. And that is longevity optimization. And I'm not just talking about annual physicals. How often have you heard a sad story where somebody waited until they felt health symptoms? Whether they ended up waiting until the cancer was stage 3, or the cognitive decline was highly noticeable, or even until the metabolic damage was irreversible. And then what? The track is already set. But ultra wealthy retirees, in many cases, I've seen them approach this in a completely different manner. They don't wait, they engineer the situation. They spend freely on predictive care rather than being reactive. Things like predictive genomics, advanced biomarker panels, or even metabolic testing. They might even have concierge and longevity physicians who monitor trends, not just repeat results. These type of scans and proactive measures could end up spotting things years early, which in turn can allow them to plan for the future. And here's the compounding benefit that I feel can be a game changer. When you're planning and working towards longevity at 60, you're not just focused at 60. You're working on cognitive sharpness at 80 and physical stability at 90. And in some cases, even the ability to steward your health at 100. One extra high-quality decade is 10 more years of trying to enhance relationships, impact, and the difference that you make on other people's lives. So in turn, this is not what I would consider to be spending, luxury, or living frivolously. But instead, it's trying to maintain and keep engaged in the life that you have built for decades. But here's the thing. Longevity might end up being completely useless if you're still stuck in the day-to-day operational functions of life. And this is where capital might end up helping you buy back your most stolen resource: sovereignty and your time. Think about this for a second. You've spent 40 years building out your empire, and now you can't depart from the day-to-day activity of life. This is where one might aim to capitalize on the foundation they've built and eliminate all operational friction in life. However, in some instances, the opposite happens, and you might end up wasting time managing properties or dealing with the household for hours on end, day after day. Additional time consumed by reviewing trust documents, planning investments, and even getting involved in the complexity of estate planning. But the reality is, if you are still doing these things, I'd argue that you're stuck in the weeds. The ultra wealthy tend to operate differently because delegation is not always enough. They create systems that run without them, building infrastructure as opposed to just hiring help. A family office that runs similar to a Fortune 500 company, but geared towards their life. A single point of contact for everything, whether it be healthcare, investment management, dealing with properties, and overall logistics of the family. They invest in executive assistants at the C-suite level, not looking for folks that could just book flights for them, but for someone that can handle their entire operational life. And in many instances, they do this because they realize that time itself is their most valuable asset. Consider this. Would I rather spend 3 hours reviewing household budgets or use those same 3 hours to build memories with my grandchildren? Would I rather focus on banking and cash flow needs or the needs and impact needed from my foundation? Every time they're able to build a system that runs without their attention, in my eyes, is buying back mental space. And mental space can compound over years and even decades into presence. Because when you free up all this mental bandwidth over the course of days, months, or years, you could end up redeploying that in ways that are more meaningful to you, that you actually truly enjoy. Which is why this next category is so important to me. Let me tell you something that breaks my heart. Every once in a while, I'll come across a retiree who has a wonderful art collection that nobody looks at, multiple houses that sit empty, or even exotic cars in climate-controlled garages that no one uses. And to add on to that, when you broach the subject of what the most impactful and important memories that they had over the last few years were, more often than not, they have nothing to do with those material possessions. Spending freely on unrepeatable experiences with family is something that they're more than likely never forget and could end up changing the shape of the future for generations to come. And whether it be on personal memories or on family and friends, I don't necessarily look at this as spending, but more so as an investment on legacy. In my mind, this can be extremely important because when it all boils down, experiences don't depreciate. But here's something wild. Even those incredible experiences can get diluted by something some wealthy people never address. And that is the next category. Although this one might seem subtle, category 4 is eliminating all low-value decisions. What do I mean by that? Think about your week right now. How many decisions come through your brain, whether just by thought or in conversation, that don't really have a great impact on life? By the end of the week, you might find yourself exhausted, not because you made a bunch of meaningful decisions, but because you've had to waste time and energy on 1,000 small ones. Decision pollution is exactly what I say can steal one's cognitive ability over time and waste your mind space. And here's where I would say ultra-wealthy retirees have really figured something out. Building this wealth and foundation is not necessarily about having more options, but about having to make fewer choices. For them, protected time and clear boundaries are non-negotiables. Because when you decide to intentionally eliminate this decision pollution, your mind might actually end up becoming a bit more quiet. Your days might feel more expansive. You might wake up with more energy and focus to do things that drive your life forward. While many think that more wealth can mean more access, more options, and more choices, we've actually seen the ultra-wealthy, in many instances, go in the opposite direction. And this is exactly what I consider to be the hidden category. But all of this, the longevity, the sovereignty, the simplicity, and the experiences tend to revolve around having one other thing in place. And this category might keep some up at night, but it might allow others to expand in a more passionate, impactful way. And that is unshakable confidence infrastructure. And what I mean is, so often I see families that have accumulated substantial wealth. I mean serious money. But they're still very, very anxious. Why is that? Because they're not necessarily sure if they're optimizing all the tools available to them. Whether it be estate planning reviews, putting the proper documentation in place for legacy planning, or worried about the next generation being prepared, or leveraging and optimizing the proper tax planning strategy. In some cases, they're even second-guessing succession planning. And despite building all of this wealth, there are so many questions unanswered. However, this feeling of chaos could present opportunity, and that is to take things a step further and buttoning them up properly. This is where things like quarterly strategic reviews, where one's entire team is coordinated and working together on the same page, or even annual family retreats, where the next generation is educated and prepared for wealth transfer. Scenario planning for every potential future, and investing in institutional grade planning. Putting systems in place where every asset is documented and digitized. Full transparency across the family office. The succession plan is stress tested, and the next generation is well prepared for what's to come in the future. And the goal of all of this, in my opinion, is to build unshakable peace of mind. And while these categories might seem overwhelming at first, I like to think of them as structure in an ever-changing situation. Longevity optimization, where you're trying to engineer decades of high-quality years, eliminating all operational friction, building experiences that can last for generations in shaping the future, eliminating decision pollution, and building an unshakable mindset. And an additional point that I want to cover is that building in this strategic leverage is something that can be scaled to one's own net worth, not just necessarily for billionaires. The families that embark on this journey, the ones that I see tend not to have regrets when it comes to capital deployment, are those whose focus is not solely on building assets and wealth, but more so on building their impact by design. They tend to be aware, intentional, and optimizing for peace. And if you're still in your accumulation phase, but you're not sure what that enough number is, check out our next video here.